Kaya FM podcast.
So as we get to this hour, you ask yourself questions of what else is there to talk about and to explore within this whole conversation that we are having. And I was saying, Eugene Skeef for me is a very interesting personality in the sense that, let alone the fact that he's quite expressive, as an artist, but he also explores very interesting subjects, to find him working on the project that celebrates the work of Mama Esther Nala, a potter who makes some of the most amazing award-winning pots, whose work we all know, but we never really paid attention, to just what an amazing story there is in that one. And Eugene is here on the occasion of honoring the memory of Bheki Mseleku, who passed this walk of life 10 years ago. And he has been working endlessly to keep that memory alive. And of course, he comes at a time when everybody is quoting the beautiful words of a great word master and leader of consciousness, Steve Biko. So, it's very interesting that all of this converges at midday today with you being in the show. Welcome to Kaya FM, Eugene.
Thank you, Brenda, my beautiful sister. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be in the space that you grace so beautifully.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
The last time we did speak, we were not looking at each other like across the desk like we are right now. So we thank everybody who made it possible.
For us to be face to face.
And you do take this every year. You take this trip to come and do this work, and you continue to keep alive, the memory of a great musician, Bheki Mseleku. This celebration was interesting. It had much more. I mean, last year we laid a tombstone for Bheki, yeah. And we had great performances. And this year we got into the subject of analyzing the man's work. Yeah. Tell us a little bit how that has been going.
Well, in fact, my connection to Bheki Mseleku, as you know, goes way, way, way back to the times of my activism with Steve Biko, and I actually introduced him to Steve Biko, so that's an incredible link as well. And it's not accidental for me, speaking poetically, that the clan or family adulations of the Mselekus pertain to water. Manzi, Mtombeni, etc., Luandle. And I'm somebody who's very, very conscious of the power of rivers as an African. We are the inheritors of the legacy of the longest memory of rivers, the Nile, starting at the headwaters of the Great Lakes, where today I feel like a pink flamingo on the fringes of that lake. So my connection with Bheki goes back to our youth in the 70s, and I met him when he was quite a vulnerable person without a piano and needing to express himself. And from within the context of the Black Consciousness movement, one of my roles was to work with artists and bring them into a place where they can be confident of who they are, so that whether they were imbibing musics from abroad, they would know that they are the source of it all. So that's where we come from. And I was the person who taught him meditation and relaxation and a deeper focus of spirituality, so that he could articulate his vision and his dream and permeate all his consciousness and the community that surrounded him with the genius of his natural ability to flow like a river, because he was untaught. And he just could touch a piano and make it happen. He could touch a saxophone and make it happen. There's a story where we were with Ebi Klindi, and I was illegally going into Lesotho because my passport had been taken by the regime. And in the time that it took us to drive from Johannesburg to Maseru, where there were other international great jazz musicians coming from the States, and we were playing at a festival. In that time, in the Kombi that we were driving in, Bheki Mseleku borrowed the soprano sax of Ebi Klindi, ex-Malombo jazzman, and in that short space of time he mastered it beyond his own wildest dreams, so that when he played it at the festival, even Ebi Klindi was a little uncomfortable with envy, for this man who could just play. So we flowed like that, and that's my greatest memory of him here.
the rivers keep flowing, particularly when you're in the room. You're a great, wordsmith as well, and you write beautifully. I would like to ask a question on the work of memorizing, somebody whose contribution is as immense as Peggy's one. What would be essentially the most important outcome when you spend time, you collecting the memoirs, you probably going to take them to fruition. But when any young person in the next 30 years encounters this work, what would you like them to take away from what Peggy stood for and what he left behind?
What I would like young people to take from Peggy's memory and Peggy's story is already encapsulated in the messages that I'm getting privately from people who were present at the recent conversations about him and the performances in memory of him at the Wits Theatre.
Yeah.
And the inspiration to my answer comes from Afrika Mkhize telling his story about Peggy, that in the few times that he met him, Peggy actually never physically showed him what to do on the piano. Yet Africa plays Peggy, Light Nduduzo, and a few others better than anybody on the planet. And because Peggy taught in a way that I like to teach, which is an organic way that I call flow. So Africa says Peggy, when he asked him to help him, Peggy just said, breathe. And he was a teenager then. Africa was 17 years old. And to him that confused him because he was breathing. The fact that he was alive meant that he breathed. But Peggy was talking about a deeper kind of breathing, which even Jibo Peter last night at the barbecue on my behalf talked about bassists, about Johnny telling bassists that they have to breathe when they play. So what Peggy was telling people is that you just have to be still within yourself and imbibe every nuance of reality around you. And the way to do that is through meditation and deep consciousness. So what I would say to young people, which I have already begun through my masterclass at Wits University with students who were totally unfocused with their smartphones and shuffling about the chairs, brought them to this place of just being centered within themselves. So Peggy's knowledge and Peggy's wisdom can even come to them through meditation. In some ways, they don't even need to meet Peggy, to have met him, or to even see the archives, but just to imbibe this kind of consciousness of knowing that what comes through your fingers or through your voice or through your saxophone is something that's from way beyond you, that you imbibe and center in your central chakra and then express. It's about just being centered and flowing.
Eugene Skeef is here in the studio, ladies and gentlemen, and we made the intro and spoke about why he comes to the country so often to come and share spiritually in memorizing Peggy Mseleko. But he's here for other reasons as well, and one of his passions is to teach. And he did spend a wonderful time at Wits, and this is the story he's telling us about. I loved the photograph where I saw all these young people reaching out to you, and I asked myself a question, somebody who is a mother, somebody who walks past young children every day on my way to work, on the corridors in the buildings where I work, and that is there something that we're not understanding about what the youngsters need to hear?
I come from a background through my mother and through Steve Biko, my mother even before, and my dad before Steve Biko, a background whereby the most vulnerable people who in any society are the youngest and the oldest were protected. My home was a safe haven for the abused, the people who came from, who were disowned by their families. My own children, I respect them, I teach them, but they teach me. My wisdom, my personal wisdom at this age comes from the relationship I have with my children, who are my best buddies. They love me, I love them. So when I was with those students at Wits, the place was chaotic. I'm a personal friend of the head of the department, Brett Piper. He spoke at the end. He was in tears. He remembered me mentoring him 25 years ago, sitting watching the vermilion sunset, looking at the Atlantic Ocean in Cape Town, where there was to be, where the cranes were there and the building mechanisms to set up that waterfront were there right at the beginning. He came and took the stage and thanked me for what I was doing. But what I did with those young people was to find that these were young people. Some of them came to speak to me at the end. They confessed to me privately things that I can't reveal now about their frustration in terms of the education that they're getting, with all due respects to the institutions in South Africa. But none of them is touching those young people where they need to touch them. My work opened those people to themselves, where I said the kind of listening that young people have that gets polluted later is not only through their ears, through the lobes of their ears on the sides of their heads, through every follicle of their hair, through their nostrils, through their eyes, through the pores on their skins. Another kind of listening, which I call creative listening. So we got into this space where these kids couldn't believe that they could be what they were that day, who they truly are. And most academic institutions stultify that. They suffocate that. So it's about respecting children because they're the gems. They are the ones who actually... May I just read you something I wrote whilst I was waiting for you, thinking about my mother. Okay. I wrote, if like you were a cherubic baby at 11 pounds whose birth caused his mother physical hurt, but spiritual joy and love, you will have been started on a path of perpetual healing. That is my story, like the assuaging African rivers of our destiny and legacy. So we have young people who are being abused now. You know, Dr. Salim Washington, Professor Salim Washington, who was on the panel with us, you know, was saying that even in his institution, there are some naughty professors who are using sexual, naughtiness to actually make young people think that's the way that you attain your degrees or the knowledge through me because I'm the master, I'm the maestro, and it's not true, you know. So just raising the consciousness of young people and making them more alert to their environment. In fact, the biggest teacher, the biggest university for me and for Begum Selego was the natural environment. My first symphonic experiences was as a child, growing up in the most violent township, Ndunduma, in Claremont. My father was the strongest man, my mother was the healer and midwife. And my home was the place that everybody who was damaged came to. And nature taught me to love, to be patient, to have hope. And that was as a child. So if we can instill those kind of values in children, forget the other formalities and technicalities. They come second. These are primary, mechanisms and ways of being. We need to inculcate that in our children.
Sure. Wow, what a reflection there, particularly in terms of what needs to happen in the classroom maybe, or outside the classroom, or creating an environment. For the response that I saw in that picture for me was mind-blowing. And if you look at Eugene, I posted a picture of him looking very young, and you're hearing this wisdom and from this shaman. Well, the reason is because I guess, he's been around for a while, but it's also part of that self-care is part of what you talk about a lot, Eugene. When I come back, we'd like to talk to Eugene about all of that, or some of the work that he does. A very interesting project that he did in the past month that also saw the visit of the great Abdullah Ibrahim in the studios where he was working. Stay tuned for that. You're on Kaya FM. I'm going to take a break. I mean, you introduced me. The first time I saw the name of, the young lady with the young griot we're talking about was
Sola Jabate.
Sola Jabate was on your post. And I went in and I fell in love with her work. And then, of course, I remember, the work of the Nesta Nala Potts. And I'm asking myself, why are you so focused on doing work like this? Let's start first with your teaching gig event that you did last month, and why, what was going on there?
That is Aldeburgh Young Musicians in Suffolk in England. It's one of the most progressive and beautiful projects of its kind on the planet, invented 15 years ago in this beautiful place with marshes, and by a man called Colin Ver. And I'm one of the leaders who gets invited more frequently than anybody else to bring my skills to that place. And what it is we spend just about a week in a retreat with young, really brilliant young musicians, mostly classical, but others as well. Like there was a Chinese Qigong player and such like, but mainly Western classically trained instrumentalists, who I bring together with a team of artists. In this last season, this last residency, I had Adam Glasser, the South African harmonica player and pianist, and other musicians with me. And the idea is to create a sort of community, a template for a holistically healthy society through the sacred language of music, where whatever class or cultural background or ethnic group you come from, we come together as a village, and we bring skills of ensemble playing and support young people to become confident in finding their inner voice through their instrument or their singing voice. And we use improvisation and games and meditation and focusing exercises. At the end of those days, those 5 days or so, you won't believe the kind of musicianship that we get out of these kids just in that small space of time, because like I was saying earlier, we go into deeper focus. They listen in an enhanced sort of way. And this last time I was invited very especially because the man who created this project was leaving and going to France, and his replacement is a woman from the States who he wanted her to experience this kind of work at its highest. So he sought me and brought me back once again. And we were lucky this time that whilst we were there, we were able to invite Abdullah Ibrahim, who was touring the UK, and he came to witness the young people playing a big band orchestration of his tune Cherry from 1973. And he became very emotional and went around the group at the end of it. He was dancing whilst listening with me and gave fist bumps, to every single musician, Yeah. And that's the kind of place that is. So I'm a very strong believer in launching young people like that into their future musicianship.
Well, we haven't lost you to the world. The world is gaining from all your gifts in many ways, particularly young people, and that's beautiful, But the fact that you left South Africa and went into exile and you're still not able to come back because obviously you've got work commitments, you've got family commitments, but more than anything else, you take them seriously. You're not feeling like you constrained anyway, because you still keep on reminding us of important things. Yeah. I would like to know, why are we retaining the making of pots the Nala way?
Nesta Nala is without a doubt the greatest traditional potter who emerged from South Africa. She was a Zulu woman from the valleys of the Tugela River, from a village called Oyaya, not very far from Eshowe. And I came to know of her through my interest in the udu, my ceramic clay pot drum, which is a Nigerian women's ceremonial instrument. And I met her in the 2000s. I went to make two important visits, and I must say that I'm the only person I have the only footage in existence of her actually making pots. And she is a custodian of pottery from a very, very long past of women potters, passed on from generation to generation. So her own mother, Simpiwe Nala, was trained by her mother, so Nesta Nala's grandmother, when she died, when she knew she was dying, she got a calling. She went down to the valley of Utugela, the Tugela River, amongst the aloes, collected a mound of clay, put the clay emsam in their home, so that Nesta's grandmother, the daughter of her great-grandmother, can come and sit at the clay and take the heritage on further. So the clay making tradition, which is, and there's nothing more powerful than pottery on the planet in terms of human history and human expression, because clay has all the natural elements. There's fire, water, wind, spirit, and all of that, So she passed on from from mother to daughter to next daughter. So right now I'm participating in helping Jabu Nala and Tembile Nala, and I'm just forgetting the name of the other sister, to create a heritage, like a museum, in memory of their mother, so that the rest of the community, and beyond that, the ripples throughout the whole of South Africa and the rest of Africa and the world, can learn this art of being in touch with our roots, almost as if where we dig the clay is where the umbilical cord, the placenta of our ancestors was buried, and so the clay is imbued with that spirit of looking forward and going, like the African rivers that spread beyond the continent.
You tune to Kaya FM. This is the Art of Sunday. Our guest, if you'd like to know, his name is Eugene Skeef, and if you can go online right now, you will find his thoughts very, very vibrant in many different ways. One of them is the one I'd like to ask about Sona Jobate, because you are spreading yourself in terms of this work as an African, and here you are in West Africa having a wonderful relationship.
Sona Jobate is the sister of a great kora player, another great kora player called Tunde Jagede. I met them when they were young, when I was in London, in my early days of exile. In fact, she was 8 years old. And basically, I became like an uncle or surrogate father to them. And we worked together with Biti Gantuli, another great poet and sculptor. And I took Sona under my wings, if you like. And so that as a teenager, she was this beautifully talented person who had a foot in two cultures. She was a classically trained cellist up to a high degree, but she was also a classically trained kora player. So playing this West African classical tradition and the West European classical tradition. But my influence on her was to get her to understand more deeply the nuances of her art and the culture and its heritage, and how she, as arguably the first woman to become a prominent kora player, because it's a male-dominated art form. So she's from, the Jobate family, and she's the first female in that long lineage. And she has memorized the history of the entire lineage, over hundreds of years. So she then has this thing where if it is she who is teaching this craft and working with younger people, such as I trained her to do through my charity Umoya Creations, which I've brought to South Africa now to further my work. If she, as a young, beautiful woman with these incredible skills, is actually holding the tools to pass on the legacy of this great form, the greatest form on the planet, because these are our stories, that are the progenitor of stories in the West, because we are the source of humankind. So she's holding in her hands the strings that strum, the spirits of our ancestry. So if it's she, as this elegant, beautiful, graceful young woman teaching, people learn better because they learn better from younger people, in fact, and she's one of those people. So she's doing that to a great degree, and she's touring the world and playing everywhere in Canada, Germany, at the most amazing festivals. And the one thing I like about it is that she never forgets. She often comments that this is where it came from. So she gets me free tickets with Azra, my wife, and then she praises me as the person who mentored her, who started her off, And I want to bring her to South Africa next year.
I'm holding breath. Yeah. I really think it's going to happen. That's a beautiful thing that you've just said there. The one thing that I admire always is how you speak about yourself. The lack of reticence, because we are afraid to express. I don't know where we learned that. But having said that, Eugene, I admire that a lot, is the very question of what somebody says, we tend to write ourselves backwards.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I understand.
And I think there's merit in talking about where things started.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear your opinion, on the question of creating memory, honoring memory, and those that came before, standing on their shoulders.
Yes. I will answer that question poetically, because I started off, I love you. You bring the best out of me, Brenda. That's a fact. You have a way of touching me like that clay and molding me in a way that actually becomes a vessel that is a receptacle, of the resonance of who we are. So I talk about waters and rivers flowing. We have the longest river on the planet, and that's not by accident. So we have to take that seriously. We inherit, a river flows from the headwaters, in our case, the Great Lakes, and it goes all the way, to Egypt, yeah? That river along the way collects minerals and becomes more itself than it could ever have imagined at source, at the head springs. By the time it comes to the estuary, to let go and to sigh and breathe out and exhale into the sea that takes it to the rest of the world, it knows who it is. I am that kind of person. So if I may just read a little poem that I wrote in my symphonic poem, In Search of My River, because I found when I got home, trying to start to come back home, I found my river, the river of my childhood, chemically poisoned, but I found where it came out. Interlaced nuances of language and indigeneity, dissolve within the depths of the submerged cave of primordial identity. The follicles of memory secrete an incantation of encrypted parables whose syntax is of flowing waters. Like a severed gourd, I float in resonance with the sunken dome, deciphering the rippling rhymes that tell the tale of my ancestors, whose humility was enshrined in the submission of countless millennia to the selfless acoustics of sacrificial baptism. For no sound can convey the voice of the eternal like the immersive surrender to the poetry of water, whose verses are measured not in the convention of stanzas, but with feathered undulations in the wake of silence, so that the perfection of pitch residing in the dormancy of ambiguity is attained through the state of grace that fills receptacles of innocence with the benediction of wisdom, that is the bestowal of one and all in the open arena that holds no prescriptive foundation. For water can erode the obduracy of a mountain through the persistence of its caresses and bring to light the hidden shapes of buried desires. Time dissolves on the tongue of a river like the sugar of love's pain and the salt of labor's love. The percipient eye of water sees the monument in the rock and the shadow of the rain cloud before it forms into the humble heavens. In the humble heavens, the beneficence of water can drown the ego of avarice, but assuage the drought of yearning. In the servitude of the prophecy of nature, the strands of my hair become the fluid time lines beatifying the topography of our story.
Eugene Skeef, ladies and gentlemen. Umoya Creations. He is extending his work to South Africa. Find him online. Make friends. Wisdom. I don't want to even spoil this moment.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned to Kaya FM for more.